Countdown.
That's a perfect start of the show for me. That's outstanding. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Greg.
You ready? And we're
Ready.
here to give you
The hi
hi hat.
hat.
Perfect. Perfectly in sync.
Oh my god.
That'll be the template we work from now on. What? Hey, holy shit, we're back after a little bit of technical difficulties right off the bat. Yeah, I'm not going to say who it was, but it's the one of
Oh
us
well,
with
it was
less
me.
hair.
Yes.
See, now
Technology
there's
is
a
great
jab.
except when it
There's a
doesn't work.
jab.
Yeah. Oh,
That's the
Mr. Harris,
jab
what are
you
you
were
drinking
looking
tonight?
for in pre-show.
What are you drinking tonight, Mr. Harris?
Well, first of all, I want to apologize. I hope you've had a good week, by the way. But
It was
I
okay.
guess I'll just I've got an eye that might look a little bit weird, and I was out. I actually had a couple of days to myself where I wasn't working on any projects or anything. So finally got some time, and Michelle's family has got um, some places, some pretty nice places actually, on some lots on Lake Gaston, which is our home lake, as you know. So we went up there for a quick weekend getaway, and I can't figure out quite when I did it, but I've narrowed it down to either two things. One being that there were feather pillows on the bed that I slept in, and I'm allergic to feathers. Or two, I took a bug or a piece of trash to the eye. So I've got a really bloodshot eye. It doesn't hurt or anything. It's just, it was really bad over the weekend, but it looks a little bit better now. So, but yeah, it was a fun weekend getaway. It's kind of funny, growing up on that lake. Lake Gaston. If you don't know, it's right on the border of North Carolina and Virginia, in the
It
middle, in
is.
the center part of the state. Yep. And it stretches from, I'd say, for a point of reference, from about Greensboro, although the lake is nowhere near Greensboro. We're talking about right up, all the way over to probably as far east as I'd say. What's the point of reference east? Rocky Mountain or so,
So he's
somewhere
at
around
about
there.
150 miles maybe.
Yeah, so
In length.
it's a big lake, and well, I'm not going to say exactly where we were, but we were
Well, you just did
on
Lake
what.
Gaston.
Well, I know, but I'm talking about where at on the lake. But it's a unique perspective for me because I was on the Virginia side and the west side of the lake, close to the Kerr Dam. And when we grew up, we were at the Roanoke Rapids Dam. you know, and the middle point of the lake is the Eaton's Ferry Bridge, and like everybody who's ever been on Lake Gaston knows that because that's where all the boat docks and everything are. But my wife and I both spent a lot of time on that lake when we were teenagers, and we were reminiscing. She grew up in Raleigh, but her family has had places on Lake Gaston since she was a child. And I just lived there, 10 miles down the road. So I said, who knows how many times we probably passed each other on a boat on this lake before we even met, you know? So that was kind of unique. But they love it up there. I do too. It was fun. It's a campground and a bunch of people and campfires and just boats and, but, I did everything you could possibly imagine that you can do in Lake Gaston by the time I was 18. So, you know, at this point, I only like it in small doses, but I
Legally
get
and
the,
illegally.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. If it involves getting naked and being in the water, I've done it.
Can we see some pics? You got
No,
pics?
no, I've got some impetigo.
And from the way it looks in that picture, you might have gotten some pink eye too.
Yeah, that's probably, I didn't even think about that. That's probably where it came from. Michelle,
No, she
Michelle
did not.
was farting in my pillows while I was out of the room. That's probably what happened. She really didn't do
Take
that.
that, you
If
sorry son of a
Michelle watches,
bitch.
Michelle, I don't mean it. I was being ultra sarcastic. Why did you say I farted on you? I wasn't. I was joking, honey.
Oh my god, now everybody thinks I fought on your face.
Yeah. Hey,
Honey, it's a joke.
hey, Hunter, let's just edit this out. I'm just joking. We'll keep it in. So that's it for me. Anybody who doesn't follow national weather too, I just want to let you know that it's about equal to the temperature of hell in North Carolina. And oddly enough, I would be working on a project where I'm outside a good part of the time. So if I just fallen off to sleep in a coma here shortly, don't be surprised.
Hunter,
Used
get a
to it.
stick. I'm gonna have to poke him.
Mhm. Well, he's downstairs, so he can actually come up and administer oxygen or whatever if I need it. Administer. Sorry. Whoa, enough about me. How was your week and everything?
It did very, very mundane. Uh, hot as um. Wishing I was back in Chicago for another vacation.
The week back after vacation.
That's it. Yeah, I so didn't want to be at work this past week,
Yeah.
but bills got to get paid somehow. But no, it
What?
was I. The only really big news is that one of our cars died today. So
Ouch.
yeah, but we had we had three. Now we're down to two. So we're just going to be at two for a little while.
That's good. I remember having that third backup, and I sold mine recently, so I get it. That sense of security, man. Yeah.
Yeah, it was transmission went out, and it would cost the price it would cost to put a new or even a used one in would probably eclipse the worth of the car at this point.
Yeah.
So
And as soon as you fix that, then it'll be something
that
else.
being said, would you like a car? I can sell you a car if you want.
I'm good. Yep.
You good? You sure?
Yeah. I'm trying to
Brand new
eliminate debt
tires.
right now, so I'm like hard pressed in that mode, which is a oddly enough, even an unintentional segue into the topic of our show. Unless you had something else that you wanted to share. I bet you've still
Yeah.
been hitting the casinos. Be honest.
Oh
Have you been
yeah.
to a casino this week?
Yes, I have.
See? Yeah. So it ain't so mundane after all, is it, Mr. Hot Shot?
No,
But
it's a hot shot.
I know you consider that work too. I mean, I know how
Yeah,
your
well,
mind works because you're there to make
that,
a living.
that's right. You got to grind it out, brother, one way or
Yep.
another. Got to cash
Well,
these tickets.
what's the guy from Rounders that shoot the guy that in the movie Rounders, he was kind of like the mentor, and he just made a steady living.
Oh, Kanish.
John Turturro played him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Kanish.
Huh?
Kanish.
Yeah, that's it. You're fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was a
God, I
great
could watch
freaking
that
movie.
movie.
Yeah,
I still watch it
yeah,
to this day,
me too. You know,
whenever it's on.
yeah, and I've got my problems with Matt Damon, but I'm not going to get into that. We've talked about him, face to face, but um, he's a great damn actor. I mean, I'll give him that. And he's made some of the greatest movies ever. And that movie, I think that's his masterpiece, honestly. I mean, it's that movie is so freaking good. The thing about good movies, there's some like you remember, did you ever see The Revenant that
Yes,
Leo DiCaprio
DiCaprio.
won the Oscar for? I mean, one of
Yes.
the greatest movies I've ever seen. But I don't want to see that movie, over and over again. Maybe the last 30 or 45 minutes is, I want to see that over and over again, but not the whole movie. But a movie like Rounders, those kinds of movies, it's kind of like, it's just a joyride. It's kind of like Ocean's 11. You know what I mean? You just, you can just watch it. Anytime it's on, you just Oh, I gotta watch just at least 15
Well,
minutes.
for me, without getting too deep into it, for me, The Revenant was more. It was very pretty. The cinematography on it, I will watch it again and again just for the cinematography,
Yeah.
the way it captured, you know, nature, and how he was able to capture that on film. The story, to me, the story was just, it was pretty run of the mill. A revenge flick is basically
Yeah.
what it was. But the way it was shot and the scenery that they chose to shoot that movie in was just absolutely gorgeous. I'll watch it just for that and nothing else.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then, I think, another thing that I always forget about is like how many like great cinematographically done things are they about the French and Indian War in that era. You know what I mean? So you got to take that in consideration too, because there's some great conflict footage there. It really sets the mood for everything that's going on. It was just wild territory, but that has nothing to do with what we're here to talk about. As usual.
No, that's okay. That's how we roll.
hmm We're like Rich Eisen. That's a joke for Hunter. It's all right. We
I
can
was
edit
gonna
that out
say,
too.
that just.
Yeah, that's all right. We're just entertaining ourselves. Um, so the subject that you wanted to talk about this week is the damn economy.
The damned economy. Well, I was looking just kind of, and most people know this, that at least for now, UPS uh, and its workers have avoided a strike for right now. And it just reading this article, and it was it had a snippet in there. It had a paragraph that part-time workers were starting out at 15.50 an hour, and that was one of the kind of the sticking points of the union that needed to increase. And me being my old ass self remembers back when I was 18 to 22 years old, and if somebody had come along and handed me a job starting out at 15.50 an hour, I would have said yes, please, thank you, sir. But
hmm
that got me thinking, so far as the bigger picture, as well, this is not 30 years ago. Times have changed. Everything goes up. Inflation. I'm not spouting off anything different than our parents spouted off when or their parents before them. And I was just got to thinking. I was like, where does it end? I mean, as goods go up, services go up. Workers can't afford those services, so they need increases in their pay to keep up, and it seemed like it was just a vicious cycle. And is it going to end? I mean, are we looking 30, 40, 50 years from now where it's going to cost you $1,000 to fill up your tank? Or is it going
Yeah. No, it's just that, I mean, it's the flaw of capitalism, basically, is what we're looking at here, because they're battling its biggest enemy is inflation. Because the promise of capitalism and what makes it so great that everybody, quote unquote, supposedly has the opportunity to amass wealth, property, whatever, to the limits of their imagination. There's the possibility. Okay, that's what the promise of capitalism is. But, as you go along and over the years and everything, I mean, the system gets, integrated with government restrictions and policies about how the way to do business and licensing your business and, training that were required and just all these added costs. And so, like, the idea of actually opening up your own business now is like ludicrous just because, I mean, just the startup costs alone are like almost imaginable. So we're just, a bunch of companies that have become multi conglomerates. And so there's just, basically probably 100 of corporations that are basically one in the world now. And a problem with inflation is granted everything costs more, and that's a big problem in and of itself, but it creates a even more disparity between the haves and the have-nots. Because, like, back when you made $1 an hour, you know, and then there was, a rich man, he made it, you know, $10 an hour. I mean, that guy was the rich guy. You know what I'm saying? And so now, everything is like increased exponentially. I mean, there's you're making $15 an hour. I mean, you're basically making like $35,000 a year. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? And I
which
mean,
is
a lot
dangerous to the
less
poverty
money when
line.
you think about what middle class
Yeah,
is. It's like, probably, I'm talking about family income, probably somewhere around $100,000 in most places. Median income. I mean, that's a big difference.
and you know, but how does it stop? I mean, that's the thing. It is. It's like, where does it end up? And if it ends up in a place where nobody wants to be, how? And I'm sure smarter minds than ours that have been toying with this. And on top of that, it's like the middle class have a lot of these companies in their 401ks, and so do the presidents and the CEOs and the owners, I, they're so far removed. All they're looking to do, and I have to give credit to my wife Jan. Jan and I were talking about this just before we went on the air. Where does it? Where does the blame lie, if there is a blame? So far
Yeah,
as like, do CEOs make far too much money and get golden parachutes? Is that fair? Um,
it's part of it.
and on top of that, their only reason of existence is to make sure that their revenue from year to year increases. If they
Hmm.
have a couple of years of down years, they're gone. I mean, they're fired. They'll find somebody else, and in order to meet that goal, no matter how unrealistic it may be, where do they where do they first cut? Do they cut benefits? They cut wages. They cut because labor is your biggest expense in just about any business.
Well, sure. I mean, and I mean that's the problem is that like robotics are doing a lot of the skilled positions that people used to do, and there's fewer and fewer skilled position jobs and fewer people learning trades and skilled position jobs, and almost everything is now a service job. I mean, it's really getting to a point that the lower class and the lower middle class essentially is basically just slaves or servants, although paid servants to the upper class. I mean, if you think about it, how much of business in this world, from real estate to recreation, it basically anything caters to upper middle class to upper class people. It's their world, and businesses and things to do to service them. You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to play like no race, not race war, Jesus, no class war or anything like that. But I mean, there's real legitimacy for like people complaining, and being frustrated. But, you can look at simple things, like on the ground level, but it's really now at this point where conceptually that we just reached an end. And I mean, it's not just us, it's the world economy in general. I mean, you can just look at Europe. I mean, if it wasn't for the European Union, I mean, Italy and Greece and other countries would have just been gone bankrupt. You know, I mean, essentially, I mean, the only thing that saved them was, the European Union buying them out. But, you know, the thing of it is now Europe is like super weak when they were like one of the major economies forever. And they're just struggling to hang on, and America is too. And what it is I mean, wealth is really meaningless. Anything that anybody that has wealth it's really mostly built on the speculation of the future. You know what I mean? Like stocks and things like that, investments and whatever. And I mean, it's just a bubble. It's just housing. It's everything. I mean, the inflated housing market, and they're printing money like it's going out of style. So they're just flooding the market with currency, and as the solution to just keep money out there circulating and everything. But I mean, pay some people some wages. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's just all this money just flows, and it's just like every time they print a dollar bill, I mean, it's basically another borrowed dollar, you know? I mean, we've been off the gold standard since the Nixon administration. I mean, our money used to be worth what was on we had it in reserve. We
Right.
didn't print more currency than we had gold to back it up. That's laughable now. And I mean, some people argue that the United States doesn't have any, that Fort Knox is empty. There's no gold there. So, yeah. So, I mean, who knows where we're headed? I mean, what I'm saying is that like the United States, Europe, China, all of it's a huge bubble and just the slightest thing. I mean, it's all about power and people pushing things to the limit. But I don't think that there's any solution to what has always been the solution, and that's a reset, a giant reset. We've seen many versions of them, but it's either going to be a war or just a calamity. And I mean, it happens. Russia
And
collapsed.
the global economy in the last 50 years has become so intertwined. It used to be the United States was a market, and even individual countries in Europe, it seemed like was a market, and individual countries in Asia. But we are so intertwined. We're basically from, and maybe and I may be off base, but it's kind of the MAD method, mutually assured destruction,
Hmm.
because we're all so intertwined. If one falls, or if several fall, eventually there's not going to be enough wealthy countries to pick up the struggling countries, and it's going to sink us all down into a, like you said, either a great global depression
Hmm.
or anything like that. But we're so intertwined economically, we can't just. A lot of people say, well, we can't just say to China, we're not going to buy your stuff anymore, or we're not going to buy your retail or your manufactured goods, because then where are we going to get it? Number one, where are we going to get it? Number two, how much is it going to cost? And number three, well, if we don't buy it, somebody else will,
Hmm.
from that particular market. So it's not just as easy as to say, you know, a trade embargo or something like that, or anything like that, because we're all we're all tied together economically.
Yeah. I mean, I know, and a lot of people argue that having like a world government or a singular world government now that there's world trade and everything, but I mean, I think that's really the most dangerous path that we can go. And I understand that there's some conflict, that could be avoided if we all just tried to figure out a way to get along. But the autonomy and the different mind frames, I mean, is the key to making all these cogs work and turn. So, and plus, human nature's own tendency towards fascism, you know, it's got to have you concerned because once there's a world tyrant, I mean, that's the end of it, isn't it? So I don't know.
Or communism, where there's
I
a was
mean,
a
I
communism
mean,
where there's a like a organization or a government body, that's made up of a few, high-ranking officers that pretty much call the shots for everything.
yeah. I mean, my biggest concern right now is China. I mean, because they're trying to become the world superpower. I mean, you can say what you want. I mean, they built up this massive army and this massive arsenal, and they got more bombs than anybody. And I mean, they have more money. And by the way, the money that China has, for anybody that doesn't want, or doesn't know, is inflated income as well. I mean, they've got entire cities that are just vast wastelands. They just built them just to keep their construction businesses afloat. that all have billions of dollars in debt themselves. So, I mean, but that's what China has made their money on is like loaning money to other countries. But, when all the money runs out, when you get to that point to the reset, I mean, what is China going to do? They can't default on, shut the world down for defaulting on them. I mean, it'll just somehow or another that's going to be wiped away, and we'll start over again. Just like, I mean, you look at all the threats, the seemingly threats to be world powers. I mean, in the 50s it was Red China, they collapsed, and then in the 80s it was Japan is going to it was taking over the world. They were so business savvy and everything, and I mean, Japan's still doing well, but I mean, they're nothing compared to what they
Eh,
used to. In Saudi
yeah,
Arabia and the Middle East right now, in certain countries that control the oil, I mean, they're just rolling in it right now. But it won't be long, and then that dries up, and then where will they be at that point? Nothing but another third world country. You know what I mean?
exactly.
And that would go right back to that. And so, China is there. I mean, but they'll have their downfall too. And it's their population, which, by the way, I don't want to monopolize this, but I know you wanted to talk about COVID because COVID sucked and the whole handling of that sucked. And that's a big part of why we are, or why
Oh,
we
it
are
just
where
it
we
just
are.
it in my opinion it accelerated what was the inevitable anyway. It's one of those things where before COVID, even like a year or two before COVID, they were floating around $15 an hour minimums at to flip burgers,
Hmm.
and people were balking at that as but then COVID happened, and when that passed, nobody went back to work
Yeah.
because the government gave them so much money they didn't have to go back to work, and so in order to get employees back, companies had to say, well, I guess we can't pay anybody $10 an hour. We got to go 15 and higher to
Hmm.
get to attract the people back that we lost during COVID. And I just think with the inflation and everything. I mean, I just heard today that the Fed raised rates again by another 1/4%. Who knows how long they're going to keep doing that?
I mean, I
Um,
honestly, I work in the mortgage business. I'm invested in a company that's in the mortgage business, so I know a lot about it. And I mean, I know it sucks for people that are buying a house, but shit, you can't give away money for free for 20 years, and then not expect that there's going to be a housing bubble at some point.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, I was
Shit. I mean, we're talking about
Jan.
it for 20 years. I mean, interest rates at five and below. I mean, and and when I first got into the mortgage industry, and that was like back in the Clinton administration. I mean, rates at that time were like 8.5%, and that was historically as low as they'd ever been. And I mean, we dropped down to points where we were like at two. I mean, that's just like giving money to people to go buy a house. These are government-backed loans, and what happens when they default? More debt for the U.S. government. And we've been through two housing bubbles already, and they just got kicked down the line, and another's about to happen. Excuse me, sneezing. Another one is about to happen. Was what I was gonna say.
I was getting ready. I mean, I don't know. We were fortunate. Jan and I were fortunate to get to buy a house when the rates were still low. Like they were. I think we had to buy a half a point to get it down to three point
I mean, that's
five.
outstanding.
Yeah. But then, like 6 months after that, the Fed started raising rates again. I know it's hard for a lot of people, and it will take discipline. But if you can get yourself out of debt, like and live without debt, you know
Yeah, that's the key.
that's the key. I mean, if you can live a lifestyle where live below your means a little bit, and save, and I know it's
Hmm.
hard, and it's hard to keep it that way, but that's what we've been doing, and quite frankly, I mean, savings, right now is that like this is the best time to put money in savings in the last 20,
Oh
30
yeah,
years.
yeah. I mean, I'm really at this point. I mean, the money that I have, I want to divest it. You know what I mean? I don't want to put it all in the same place because it's so screwy. I mean, there's been, I don't know if you heard about this, but there was, I think a year or two ago back in Greece, and they were having another financial crisis. I mean, how many have they had? Well, the banks closed for like a week. And when they reopened the banks, they said, okay, we're reopening the banks and everybody's account is, back and you have access to it, but you only have 90% of what was in there or something like that. That's how they corrected the situation. Now, if you've only got $100 in the bank, that's fine. You know what I mean?
So congratulations, now you got
Yeah,
90.
but it's a little different.
And
If
it's funny that it's like these same countries seem to be doing the same thing and getting the same into the same predicament, and they're needing another bailout or another financial assist. You know, at what point, you know, it's almost like the what we went through with the recession. You had businesses or industries that were too big to
hmm
fail. And I'm just like, I always looked at that. I'm like, no, they're not, because of their incompetence. I got to pay for it now, or the rest of this country has got to pay for it now, or if you agree, so it's like if I'm in like Germany, I say, oh great, part of my money is going to bail out a bunch of
hmm
dumbasses or corruption even who can't seem to you know get like 2 plus 2 equals 4, and they keep doing the same things over and over again. I mean, and that's another part of that mutually assured destruction. I mean, they're going to keep. At what point do you sell the tough love? I mean, they're not going to let Greece
hmm
fail, And I just, I mean, it's going to be painful, but the solution is almost always easy, but the will to implement it is
I mean, like
hard.
the funny thing
Just
about
let it
Greece,
fail.
though, is it's
Let
just
it
like
fail.
all of Europe's like, "Come on, Greece, man, come on!" Like, and then Greece is like, "Oh, I don't know. Come, can you just help us out?" It's like, "Are you going to try harder?" Yeah, I guess we will. Just help us out. Come on, we're a family. The Greek.
Did you gamble away the money again? Did you? I'll give you money for the heat. Did you gamble away this money? Just tell me you gambled away the money, and I'll give you the money to turn the
I
heat
mean,
back
the
on.
United States has enough problems with itself. Yeah, and we can talk about it. I mean, it's just absolute waste and ridiculousness. And I mean, I know government is needed, and I'm not talking about having anarchy or anything like that, but the government just slowly integrates itself more and more into every aspect of your life. And I mean, every one of them is like it's like just an aggravating intrusion. Like, I would just say, like, for example, like in the mortgage industry, because I'm familiar with it, all of a sudden now you have to take a class every year that takes up a whole week of your time just to have a mortgage license. Now, I mean, can you trust that someone's going to keep themselves, educated on what the laws are? I mean, it's just stupid. I mean, just stuff like that. But it's, time away from work, time away from your schedule, money to pay. You have to pay for the class, and then you have to relicense every year. It's just stupid. I mean, it's just things like that, and that's just one thing. And then, like on surface, maybe that's a good idea. We don't need stupid people in the mortgage industry. I get that, but I mean, it's that, and then it's something else, and then something else, and then something else, and then something else, and then over the course of two, three, 100 years, you know, we're this gross inflated bureaucracy of a government that accomplishes nothing. I mean, you look at everything the government does. They go right in. The first thing they do before they do anything to accomplish anything is set up this fat ass chain of bureaucracy, who's in charge and who's going to be under it, and all this stuff. And then, it'll maybe a year before they actually get to working on the project that they're doing, before they hire all the big cushy jobs for people to put in there. And everything in the U.S. government is like that. There's so many useless. I mean, we could just audit our own federal government and just get rid of the waste. I mean, half the country would probably be unemployed, but yeah, I mean, it's literally like that. I mean, the U.S. government. I mean, no matter how you want to look at it, I mean, it's a company in and of itself, and it's been mismanaged, and the books have been cooked, just like every other country's books have been cooked, and it's all a facade, and it all dangles on this teeny little high wire that we walk on. And I'm telling you, there'll be a reset. It'll either be an economical global disaster, like another, depression, like a global depression, or it'll be another war. And I tend to lean towards the war. But I don't think it'll be like traditional with guns and weapons and stuff. It'll be more of a cyber war, like a technology and, that sort of thing.
That stuff is going
Oh,
on
sure.
already. Really, I mean, it's almost like they're testing the defenses to see on both sides, us against whoever and whoever against us. They're kind of testing to see the weak
Hmm.
points on that. And I, I I think the United the U.S. government can shed half of its workforce and still and probably function better.
I mean, I want to get back to this. I'm glad you said that because I think it's really important to look at this situation where we are. I mean, if you look back on COVID before it hit, I mean, the world was in bad shape economically. I mean, with all the debt and all the problems everyone was facing. And COVID basically just said, okay, let's double it. And that's essentially what the result of a year and a half or two of COVID was. So, with that in mind, I wanted to ask you, do you believe that COVID was a natural phenomenon, or do you believe that someone is actually responsible for COVID? And I'll answer first if it makes you feel better.
Oh no, I firmly believe that it was not natural. I firmly believe somebody or some group or some government was behind the
Hmm.
leak, as it were. Whether I mean, uh, quite frankly, I believe China
Oh, I
probably.
believe, China developed that. I think it's pretty,
I mean, it's not really that
exactly.
disputable, and quite frankly, uh, there's enough dirt on Dr. Fauci now that if he wasn't part of it, he was so blinded by the money he was getting for his research that he just turned a
Hmm.
blind eye to it and tried to spin it the way the real source of where how COVID was released to the world, and
Yeah.
I don't know why he was even allowed to like go on as long as he had. For Trump to have him go on as long as he had, like I'm just like I don't know. I really yeah I think and you try. I mean I don't want to say anything bad about the people of China, but their government is just I
Yeah.
wouldn't put it above them. I
Well,
wouldn't put it past
I,
them to
I
do
don't
this.
think that there's any dispute that the origin of COVID was, a lab in China. I don't think there's any, but I guess so we agree on that. So my next question to you is, do you think that it was an accidental release or do you think it was intentional? Because I believe it was intentional. And then I'll
Yeah,
go ahead.
I lean the same way. I do.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't think this was an accident. I really don't. And if nothing else was maybe, and not to go all conspiracy theory, but I think this was another probe just to see how we would
I don't
react
know if
to it.
that's what it was because I mean it hit China first and then it grew there and went from there. I mean, if you look at China, I mean, you just have to look at who benefits. I mean, why would they do this? Because they hurt themselves first and probably more than anybody. But you look at this disease, and there's China, and they're looking at everything, and it's a fascist state. And, you know, as far as a fascist state, the preservation of the state is the only thing that matters. You know, the people are meaningless. It's only what they can contribute to the state that matters. So that's how they look at everything. So they look at it and say, we've got all these fucking people and they just won't stop fucking. So I mean, we've got to do something to curtail this. So they make this disease, and who does it attack? The really young, the elderly, and the infirm. So if you're a fascist state that wants to get rid of like the drags on the state, and you can make a disease and just disperse it out to uh, the country and get rid of all the like dead weight that's out there, the people that are not working, then you'll solve a big part of your problem. And it got loose and affected some rest of the world, and then they're like, wow, that's really doing some things for China. Let's just let it go a little bit and see what happens. I mean, that's the extremist side of me and the way I look at it. Do I think that's actually the way it went down? I don't know. I mean, I think it could definitely why it went down in China and why it started and then it got out of hand. You know what I mean? But China. I mean, anytime anybody tried to say something to China about it, I mean, China be like, "What about that money you owe me, motherfucker?" And so you know what I mean. So what you can't do anything. Yeah.
F you, pay me. Yeah, I mean, and quite frankly, I mean, just to see how the rest of the world reacted to it was kind of icing on the cake because they kind of could see how the rest of the world reacted to this, you know, new virus that was let loose upon us. And I mean, quite frankly, it shut down our whole economy for what, six
Longer than
months?
that.
At least
Longer
6
than
months.
Yeah,
that.
it bankrupted at least one of my businesses. I mean, I don't for anybody that was watching and doesn't know. I mean, despite the like small level of success that we had, a long time ago. I mean, I think, people think we're just because we're on, you know, somewhat pseudo famous at a point. I mean, I bet most of the time in the projects we worked on, Greg, you and I together and the freaking frack stuff, we made like minimum wage at most, except for those MTV bonuses every once in a while. It's the only time we ever made any real money. So, despite that fact, and then we didn't do anything about promoting ourselves, or there wasn't the internet back then. And you couldn't have like YouTube. We'd have probably blown up on YouTube. You know what I mean? Just think about it. Not now, obviously, but back then we don't have anything fresh to say. But the point I'm trying to make is like for a majority of our lives, I mean, we've had to like grind through real jobs. So I mean, we're working people too, and we're not just complaining. I mean, we lived it and live it.
And yeah, and it just, and as we get older, and especially as I get older, I just, I dig the moat a little bit deeper, a little bit wider,
Mhm.
build the wall a little bit higher, make sure that I can keep what I've worked so hard for as long
Hmm.
as I can, as long as I possibly can,
Mhm.
before I'm too old to have it anymore. So I'm just kind of, it's one of those things that this is a topic that I just kind of think, forgive me, I'm just kind of staring off into space and just kind of thinking about what, you know, what has happened. Because you and I, we spent a good part of our
Hmm.
working years together. So I mean, you and I know how to grind, so
They're just,
I
yeah, being
just
stupid. I mean, you do what you have to do. I mean, I think if we sit here and talk about this, I mean, the point I think of all of this discussion is that when you look at it and you really study it, there is no solution. Well, I mean, there's going to be a solution, but something to fix a fixing solution, it doesn't exist. So it's depressing as shit. But if I can give anybody listening to this show a piece of advice from somebody that knows about these things, which you should be working on now. I mean, don't worry about it and fret about what's happening because there's really not anything you can do about it. So this is what I suggest you do. If you've got credit cards and you're not using them, stop. Don't use them anymore. Stay out of debt. Um, Property is a good investment. I wouldn't say so much houses. Undeveloped farmland would be an incredible investment right now if you can hold on to it for a while. Any kind of like fertile, undeveloped land, I think would be a great investment. That's your investment of the future right there. China knows it. That's what they're doing. Um, um, let's see. Yeah, stay out of debt, own property, diversify. Don't have all your money in one place. Don't trust the banks. There's always going to be a place where you can have your money. Buy gold, silver, valuable metals, and keep just different things, so maybe some risky ones if you want to look for some high yield stuff. But I mean, try to be conservative as possible. I wouldn't have a lot of money in the market right now. I mean, I think a lot of other people feel the same way, obviously, but
well, actually, I mean, not to not to actually this year has been pretty well. Has gone pretty well for the market so far this year. But I mean, we've all gotten into the
hmm
credit score boogeyman. I mean, the way things have works, the way the world works today, at least I feel, is so dependent on three numbers. That's your worth right now. That's as a person and as a worker or as a human being, your worth is pretty much combined into three numbers from the three credit score companies. And there's a lot of places it's hard to do, but you don't have to
hmm
have a credit score to
hmm
get what you want. You know, you can get a house. Believe it or not, you can get a house with
hmm
a zero credit score. And from what I understand, it's called
Yep.
manual underwriting. You, I mean, you know, if I'm stepping on your toes as somebody being in the mortgage industry, I don't mean to, Jeff, but it just seems to me that when you do a manual underwriting, it forces the person on the other side of the desk to actually do some legwork and thinking. I said, okay, this person's brought me
Oh,
their
here, I
last
mean,
two
here,
years
it's
of.
actually a pretty simple thing, to be honest with you. I mean, they don't, yeah, yeah. The only thing that makes doing them like hard is because Fannie and Freddie put so much verbiage about credit scores into guidelines and stuff recently. So if you don't have a score, it makes underwriters nervous about putting loans through. So they'll put them through some scrutiny, but it's still the same thing. Do you have a job? Is it stable? Do you make enough to support the mortgage that you're buying? Is the house worth what you're buying? Or do you have any outstanding bad debts or liens? No, you don't, but you don't have a credit score. So we're going to have to find some way to like verify that you have a propensity to pay your bills on time. So everybody has a rental reference. Sometimes they don't. There's ways to get around that, but wherever you stand, you can start paying quote unquote rent. Just give them a check and they cash. And there's your rental reference, and you're gonna have to do it for 6 months or so. And the other thing is they can get your payment history from cell phone company, from electric company, from anything. So you get about three or four utility. references that are golden, your rental reference is golden, you make enough money, shit, yeah, they'll do that loan.
Now, I will ask you: will there be a
Maybe,
difference in
yeah,
interest rate?
because I mean, it is. I mean, if it's FHA, I mean, you get what you get, you know. But I mean, if you go into like the conventional side, like a bank loan from say like Truist or whatever, you mean it's rated based on your. I mean, I don't know if they would do a manual underwrite on something that's not a government loan like an FHA, if you don't have the credit score, because it's the rate you get is tiered by your score. I mean, those rates, even if they would be jacked up, you would be stupid not to do FHA.
And then my is that it forces you to get a credit
Go
score.
in
Well, how
debt.
do you get a credit
Hmm.
score? You got to borrow money, go in debt to get a, which
Well,
is something you don't want to do. So okay, so
you don't have to
let's open
use
up a
them.
bunch of credit
I mean, use
cards,
it.
and
Yeah,
we'll
I mean,
promise we'll keep the
just so
payments up,
anybody
and
that
nobody
listens to
does.
this and wants to develop a credit, they have no credit score. This is all you have to do to have a credit score, and I want to let you to listen very close to this. Apply for a credit card. Your first one, if you've got no bad debt or nothing on your credit report, it's just blank, is what I'm talking about. They'll give you a credit card probably somewhere around a $300 credit limit. When you get it, activate it. When you don't, I don't want you to really use it. You may go out one time and buy a tank of gas, and when you get your bill, pay it off. Don't use the card, put it away. Maybe once every 2 or 3 months, put a tank of gas on it and just pay it off. If you do that for about 6 months, you'll have a 700 credit score. That's all you have to do. One credit card and use it that way. Don't carry any balance on it and just use it once or twice, 3 times maybe every 6 months. Small purchase.
And I think another key, if you want to go that route, I think another key to that is keep the limit low. That way, the thing is, let's just
Hmm.
say it's a $500 credit card that you get. When because they're going to do it, they're going to say, "Hey, you qualified. We can up this to 2,000 if you want," and that just gives you temptation to go
Yeah.
spend that 2,000 that you don't have. Keep the limit low. Then that way, all right. Let's just say you do
Hmm.
use it for emergencies. You can get most people can get themselves out of a $500 hole
Sure.
within a few months. But if you have like two, three, four, $5,000 limit or more, and you're not disciplined enough, and you start charging stuff, whether
Hmm.
it's emergency or not, a $500 hole is easier to get out of than
Yeah.
a
I don't
five
feel like
thousand dollar
cooking.
hole.
Let's stop. Get the family KFC and it's $60 on the credit card. That shit piles up like nobody's business. Because I can tell you, because I'm guilty as anybody.
Or I use it for groceries or something. I mean, even if you cook at home, I mean, even if you didn't go out, if you use it for like everyday expenses, then I don't know. It just if you're not disciplined enough to pay it, pay it off within the cycle, then that could lead you down
Hmm.
a hole that you don't want to
Yeah.
go down.
So can a prostitute. I'm sure you have. Never mind. I'm sure you've been down lots of holes and you didn't want to go down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I'm thinking
I
about,
think
I'm
that's a
never
that's
mind.
a
Never
that's a
mind.
great.
That could be an off air topic on that
I
one.
think that's a great place to finish the show. Yeah, I do too. Well,
Good
I just feel like
conversation.
if we kept going, we're
I
just
mean,
going to
we
depress
didn't
people
solve
more.
any problems, but at least we talked about it. We didn't solve any problems,
Yeah.
but at least we talked about it,
Well, basically,
and that's half of it.
yeah, we're just reassuring everybody the shit's real bad, but don't worry about it because there ain't nothing you can do about it. But just put put something, a little bit of something in every pocket and hold on to your britches. How about that? All right, man. Any exciting plans on the horizon for you?
Uh, Not September. I'm taking a junket with Jan to New
When are
Orleans
you?
for a couple of
Because remember, I'm
days.
trying to get up your way that time of year too.
Yeah, yeah. I told you about this off offline a little bit, but
Yeah.
yeah, like the middle of September, Jan and I are going to take a couple of days. It's through work. It's a trip to. We're going to New
Hmm.
Orleans for a couple of days. Remember the one I
Oh
went to
yeah,
Biloxi? Sent you the pictures.
that sounds like that.
Yeah, same thing,
Yeah,
but we're
I
just going
know.
to New Orleans this time.
Yeah,
But that's in
New Orleans
September.
is, I don't know. It's fun. I don't know if I could live there though. It reminds. I've been to Savannah more, and they those two towns remind me. I mean, it's hot as blazes, number one, and really like the allure to the town is like everybody parties their ass off all the time. So if you don't want to party your ass off, I mean, and then you already seen all the history, then I mean, I don't know what's left. I don't know. Maybe I'm an oddball in that regard. Now, don't get me wrong. I love both cities, but I'm just saying I could see how they can get boring if you're there all the time. New Orleans is boring.
Now is what would be the main difference between Savannah
Well,
and New Orleans? I mean, is it they're
no,
both pretty
no,
much
they're
the same,
completely different
or
cities.
is there?
I'm just saying, but it just seems like the main attraction is, you know, partying your ass off. And aside, you take the partying your ass off aspect out of both cities, and I don't know what's left, is what I'm saying.
Uh, did you go
Sure.
around the French Quarter
Like I said, the
any? Did
history
you
in
kind of
New
walk?
Orleans is incredible. And I mean, you could spend a month there just studying the historical things around there and all, all up and down the Mississippi River as far as that goes. So I'm not slamming New Orleans. I'm just saying I was just making an observation more than anything. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, people that like to be out and socialize. Yeah, and not every town is that way.
But that's all I got. I mean, that's the only thing on my horizon other than
Yeah,
grinding it out.
nothing. I'll tell you what. We depressed the shit out of everybody. Insulted insulted two other major U.S. cities. I don't think there's anything else we've got to do for this one. It's just all right.
That's a full night, my friend.
Hey, look. Yep. Have a great week, man.
You gonna take us out?
And good night, oh, and thanks for watching and like us and all that shit. Good night, everybody. Bye.
We'll try better next time.